What is going on? I want to welcome you from half court for today, Wednesday, October 19th, Pistons opening day. And with that, we couldn't just do a normal episode. We had to roll out the red carpet and do something special. So I am joined today not only by my guy, Jeff Iafredi, not only by my guy, Troy Cerny, but making his debut on From Half Court is the man himself, Jack Kelly at Jack Kelly 313 on Twitter. Jack, what's going on, brother? Finally, you are here. This felt like an inevitability. Thank you so much for coming on, man. It's so good to see you.
Nah, thank you so much, guys. I'm good. Excited to talk some Pistons hoops. I feel like there's a bit going on with the fan base at the moment on what to expect and what's going to happen, especially as we approach opening night. So, yeah, no, thanks so much for having me on. And, yeah, let's do this.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, a lot of people will know you from, like, Pistons Twitter, but if this is people's first time seeing you, like, tell us a little bit about yourself, man, about like the content that you're doing, like how did you become a Pistons fan? Because
yeah, I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, that is a great place to start, man, because I think one thing people might realize, you're not exactly from the Detroit area, Jack. Where are you joining us from today?
I honestly could not be further away from Detroit. I'm at the bottom of Australia in a city called Melbourne. But in terms of my fandom, so I've been an NBA fan since probably like 2005, but I didn't really have a team.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to sort of be a bit of a Dwight Howard fan. And then I was looking at some mock drafts in like 2011. Saw this guy called Andre Drummond. And I was like, I followed him at UConn, and I was like, whoever drafts him, I'll go for that team. Like I'm fully all in on that team. So, and the funny thing was, right, so on draft night, I remember watching, and the one team, and this will sound blasphemous, but it's part of the story. The one team I hoped he didn't get drafted by was the Pistons. I don't know why. I just did not want to get drafted by the Pistons. And then, of course, he goes for the Pistons. And, yeah, so I was a vicious Andre Drummond fan, stan, whatever you want to call it. And, yeah, that's transitioned into me. Essentially, I've been writing for Detroit Bad Boys over at SB Nation for the past 12 months. And yeah, recently just been pumping out some content on Twitter. And yeah, man, now I find myself here with you guys. So
yeah, that's awesome, man.
How did the Drummond loves? You said you stumbled upon a mock draft. You're like, you know what? I like this guy.
Because he was mocked. It would have been before the college season. He was mocked like number 1 overall. And I was like, yeah. And he was touted as the next sort of Dwight, and I love Dwight Howard and his game.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I was just like, I'm hitching myself to the Drummond wagon. And yeah.
I love that.
That's how we got here.
When they traded him in 2020 for a couple bags of chips in Cleveland, were you devastated? Did you lose your heart or what?
Nah, so I think I always saw things through like I was so obsessed with Andre, like I could only watch the games when he would be taken off the floor. Like I didn't have any interest in watching. Like I was just obsessed with Andre Drummond. But by the end of that 17-18 season, I sort of started to see who he really was. And then that 2019 playoff series against the Bucks, I was like, oh, this guy ain't it. Like I was just like, I was like, he's just not it. Like, and then I started. And then I was like, yeah, I don't know if this guy is like, I like watching him play basketball that much anymore.
That was a lot of us, by the way.
Yeah. So, and then so then the following season when he got traded, like I was all good with it because I was like, we need a tank. Like, yeah.
So it was like, oh man, like at first you fell in love with him because you're like, oh man, this guy's like Dwight Howard. And then you realize, oh God, this guy's like Dwight Howard.
Oh, right.
Everything that comes.
He's Dwight Howard without the defense, like without the defense.
Yeah.
And I used to get subdued by the stats. And like before I sort of educated myself on NBA basketball. Like,
did you do the same thing I did, Jack? So your fandom started around the same time that mine did. I started 2005 myself. Did you do the same thing that I did where every year on Twitter, on Instagram, you'd see Andre in the offseason? He's going to add a 3-point shot. Yeah. He's going to extend his game.
Oh, man. I remember seeing those Rico. It was like 2018. He's shooting threes in LA. And I'm like, whoa. He's putting it together. And then, nah, it was just never a thing. But hey, he hit 3 threes for the Bulls the other night, so
He did.
Took him some time.
bring Dre back.
Yeah.
That is a real thing that I remember that was like picking up steam at one point in the off season for a little bit. And listen, I'm glad Andre's doing well. He's never gonna come back to the Pistons. Not with this momentum.
Yeah.
No. But Jack, that's a funny story, man. I love that. But how about the how about the start of the content creating, of the writing, like how did the journey with Detroit Bad Boys start? How did you get to this point of, obviously a basketball fan, but then, getting to that next point of, covering the game, doing everything, and let alone like to get as much success as you have, man. I mean, being, I feel like I have a hard time being 2.5 hours away from Detroit. You're in a freaking across the world. You're in Australia. Like, what do I have to complain about?
No, the writing. So yeah, I'll try and keep this short, but I love basketball in general. Like, it's my passion. I work out, I play a lot of basketball just for fun and a bit of fitness. But yeah, I've always felt like I've had this obsession, like more than a normal person would. So especially over here in Australia, like not many people, there's NBA fans, but they're more of a bit more casual. Yeah. And then I was like, I just want to immerse myself amongst a community that like loves basketball as much as I do, and like NBA basketball in particular. And I just honestly, a year ago, around the first summer league with Kade, I just started writing some fan posts. So I've always been in the threads for DBB. Wrote a few fan posts, got some nice comments on there. And I was like, I'll just message Sean, who's the editor. I'm not sure if you guys know Sean Court, but
oh yeah, we know Sean. He's a great guy.
Yeah, Sean's an awesome guy. And he just took me on board, and yeah, that's really it, man. Like, I just working on my craft, and like obviously I want to get into the media somehow. That's my dream. So yeah.
Well, you definitely do it. You could definitely do it, bro.
Well, hey, yeah, you're coming a long way, man, and you're doing great stuff. Seriously. So
no, and that's why it's so cool to see you guys. Like we said before we recorded, like just seeing your guys' growth the past 6 months with Woodward and everything you guys are doing. Like, that stuff inspires me as well. So yeah,
that means a lot, man.
Yeah, we appreciate you.
Yeah, believe me.
Hey, don't be too humble, because I saw that jump shot, by the way. All right, listen, that's just true. Listen, I play basketball. I've been playing my whole life, but I watched your video. A couple months ago. You hit like how many threes in a row? I'm like, my God.
Yeah, no, I just
have you always
like,
been able to shoot like that? Let's be honest.
No, I've been working on my shot probably the past 6 months, but I appreciate that, bro. But yeah, I just love hooping, like, and then I put that passion into the Pistons and NBA as a whole.
Well, hey, when we get you over to the States one day, when we get you to the States one day, we'll get you to the Pistons Twitter like to the Hoop League. We'll know who Jeff's drafting first pick, right?
I gotta lie, I'm competitive. Like, I got bad. Like, so yeah, I'll be there taking scalps, man.
That's what I love to hear. That's what I love to hear. Well, Jack, we're here to do one thing today, and that's, share our love, like you were saying, just talking hoops, talking NBA basketball. And that's exactly what we do here on From Half Court. Each and every week, we dive into all things NBA basketball, Detroit Pistons, you name it. If you like that, be sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, share this podcast with your friends, and join the conversation in the comments section down below. The podcast is available on YouTube, but also available on all the podcast services that your heart could possibly desire. But with that, boys, it is time to get into it, because as we have stated, tonight is, as of when this podcast drops, opening night, not just for a lot of the teams in the National Basketball Association, but opening night for the Detroit Pistons. So we are here. Today's episode is a special one. It is the official Pistons season preview pod, and we couldn't bring on a better person to talk about it. Jack, I want to start with you. The Pistons right now, you kind of alluded to it at the beginning of the pod. There's a lot of different expectations, and obviously here on this podcast, we've been talking all summer about where we expect this team to be, what we expect this team to accomplish. And I know that the preseason, I don't know if it was a jarring experience for fans. I would maybe use the word sobering experience for some fans. I think maybe some fans realized that it wasn't going to be as quick, of fireworks as they maybe were hoping for it to be. Did the preseason change any expectations for you on your end? And, now, obviously, for us, we still have a couple days until this game, to watch. But, going into opening night, where are you at? How are you feeling? And what are your expectations for the team going into opening night?
Yeah, look, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't underwhelmed. I think, I mean, I've had the team pegged around 28 to 29 wins the whole off season. So I wasn't necessarily expecting them to come out and win all 4 games, but yeah, some of the defensive stuff was a little underwhelming. Kade, his passiveness was a little underwhelming, but I'm not worried by any means. But I think for a lot of fans who might have been expecting that play-in jump, which I'm not going to say there's no chance of that happening, but I think it was definitely jarring. And I think it's important to remember as well, like we're missing Alec Burks and Nerlens Noel, who will both be key contributors whenever they're back on the court. So, look, it's not all doom and gloom, but I think, yeah, for a fair portion of that fan base, yeah, they wouldn't have been expecting that sort of thing. And, yeah, some of the stuff I've seen about Cade's interesting, and I think people just need to realize at the end of the day, this roster, if we're running out of 10-man roster, I would say 6 to 7 of those guys are all 24 and under in their first, second, or third year. And when you're relying on guys with that much little experience, no matter how good they can be in the future, I just think it's tough. I just think, yeah, if we can get to 28, 29 wins, that's a 6-win increase from last season, and that's improvement.
Yeah, most definitely. And I mean, you alluded to it there, Jack. Like, if you lined up how many players they had on this roster, how many of them are under the age of 25? The average age of this roster is 24.9. It's up last year from 23.2, I believe it was. So, like, that just shows you, like, the Bojan trade just made us that much older. But I mean, it's just one of those things where, like, even looking at like the teams that are considered, like, I think one game that was like a very good experience for Pistons fans to see, or I think a very good, way for us to see like where we were at, was that last preseason game against the Grizzlies, right? And I mean, Troy, I think one big thing that makes the Grizzlies so good, I mean, we obviously talk about, Ja Morant and how special he is. A lot of people, Jayden Ivy, a lot of people are comparing to Ja Morant. I just don't think that's a fair comparison right now, because with Ja Morant, the level he's playing at this point, we're talking about like him and Allen Iverson. That to me, that's the territory that he's touching with his play, right? So like with Jayden Ivy, like, I don't know if saying like like Ja Morant's like let's not do that just yet. However, like, it still shows like there's still good things to see, right? And you can still see like I think the other thing you can see is just how many good players Memphis has. Like it's not just Ja Morant, but it's the Brandon Clark, it's the Desmond Baines, it's their deeper players in the rotation too, right?
Right, absolutely. And yeah, going with Memphis, I mean, they're a couple of steps ahead of us. I mean, that's an understatement to say. But with a guy like Ivy, you can say he has Ja-like abilities, but to call him Ja, right? That's where the line probably is crossed. And we're not expecting that out of Ivy this year. We're expecting him to play competitive basketball, to be a great role player. I would hope a starter, for a majority of the season. And
I would expect him to start opening night.
Yes, same with me. And I just feel like improvement out of him, because remember I said, the first 10 games might look a little bit rough for him, but that should not worry us. I think he's going to get in the swing of things. I think he's going to be fine. I think we can expect some production out of Ivy on Wednesday night tonight.
Yeah, that's fair. Jeff, what about you, man? I mean, as far as like that, that expectation after the preseason. I mean, right now, Vegas currently has the Pistons win total, the over under at 29.5. So about that, Jack, what you said there about 28 wins. You think it's a fair place to have the Pistons at? I know you and I talked about the goal. I think the goal should be getting to 30 wins this year, right? Like getting above that 30 win hurdle, getting to that next step, being more competitive, at least trying to be in that play-in picture. What guys are going to have to step up in order to make that happen? Like what are going to have to be the things that put the Pistons in that position. Obviously, and we all know Kade would have to play great, right? But it's deeper than that.
It is. And listen, I think I want to hear Jack's opinion on this because I talked about this as well. Like, it's hard to project this team because there's so many young guys that have to take that next step. That's simply saying that they're a plan or they're not a plan. Like, that's why you don't want to completely rule out a plan, but most likely, we talked about it, it's most likely not going to happen. I think they'll be at around 30 to 32 wins. I think that's very fair where they have the Pistons currently. But it's about the others, because we all talk about star players can get you to that championship, but who wins it? It's the others. And the others would be a Killian Hayes, Isaiah Livers, Isaiah Stewart. I would even throw with Sadiq Bey in there because we expect him to still take those steps. So
Amadou Diallo for sure.
Hami Diallo is another one. So Jalen Duren, you could throw him in that aspect because I think eventually he's going to be a key part of this rotation. So a lot of guys have to take that next step. Like you said, Kade clearly has got to have, for this team to at least make the play, and he's got to have an all-star caliber season to me, because it's hard to count on Jayden Ivy coming out his rookie year and just taking the league by storm, because Kade did that in the second half of last season. He still didn't win Rookie of the Year. So again, it's about the wins and losses, and that's how people base their expectations on. For me, it's about players getting better. Mm-hmm. That's the expectation for me, and a lot of that falls on Dwayne. You look at the assistant coaches, a lot former players. Like, I like the mold they're going with, but that's all I want to see. If players get better, I think a byproduct of that will be wins, because I don't think players are going to get better and you regress. So for fans that were completely, blindsided by the preseason, it really just shows that for this entire summer, fans spend time tweeting, making content about the Pistons. And I think they get way too excited and they watch the preseason and are like, what the hell is this? Well, guys, we talked about it, even you, Jack, to a certain extent. Like, we know what to expect. Yes, the defense, you talk about Kade being passive. There's certain things you could take away, but to watch the preseason and say, man, like, this team sucks. It's like, what have you been watching this entire offseason? Because we're getting primed for next summer to have more cap space. Mm-hmm. We're expecting to be back in the lottery in terms of where they select in the draft. Like, things haven't really changed for me. So as long as players get better, I'm okay with it. And I think a byproduct of that will be improvement. And hopefully it is reaching that 30-win mark. I think that's the goal.
Yeah, for sure. And Jack, with that, like, what are your thoughts on that? I think, again, we talk all the time about those stars, but like, I think one of the things that, I think, that, I've certainly thought is going to be the most interesting for me this year is that some of those rotation battles that we're going to be talking about, like, within the Pistons. We'll get into like some of those stars, and we'll get into Kade and Ivy here in a second. But like, when you're looking at like the Pistons rotation, like what guys are you watching as far as like development, taking the next step? Like, like, I know one guy is like Isaiah Livers, having his opportunity to be in the rotation for significant parts of this season. I feel like he can be really productive. I know Amadou Diallo is a guy I just mentioned. I know a lot of fans are really curious to see what his role is going to be this season. What guys stand out to you, and what guys excite you in the rotation?
Well, I think aside from the obvious of like Ivy and Duren, I think I'm really curious to see how Amadou's role, how that plays out this season, because he's someone who missed the preseason with, I think, was it a calf injury, something like that?
It was a leg contusion.
Yeah, and that's a guy who, if my memory serves me correct, we elected to use his team option for this season. So there was the option to let him go. And though we've added Ivy, we still do lack athleticism on the wings. Like Isaiah Livers, Sadiq Bey. Well, actually, let me wash my mouth out. Livers has shown some bounce, but I wouldn't say he's a Hamadou type athlete. So, yeah, I'm really curious to see what Hamadou's role is if he gets some minutes, unexpected minutes early on, because I have him outside the rotation. But and then definitely Isaiah Livers. We saw him in, I think he played 16 odd games last season, shot 40%. I think he's a really good team defender. And if there's one thing we saw in the preseason, anyone who can play solid perimeter defense is definitely a welcomed addition.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I mean, for me, I'm a big Isaiah Stewart guy, but in that I am a realist with Stu. So I'm really intrigued to see how he goes at the 4 this year. I think we saw in the preseason, and while I think Bogdanovic will definitely start, I would be shocked if he doesn't start opening night. I do think we get killed on the glass. And I did like what I saw from Bagley and Stu, even though it was a tad clunky. I still thought the offense and just the defense. There's a bit more interior protection, obviously. Even though Bag's not the best rim protection, he's a big body. He can get on the boards.
He can deter shots at the rim too. We can see if
yeah.
he's actually there, he can prevent shots from getting in the rim.
Yeah. So I mean, for me, I'm really curious. I want to see, especially after the trade deadline, depending on how the team's going. But I really want to see how Duren and Stu go together. That's something I'll be really keeping an eye on to see if they just trial out some minutes here and there. And yeah, I'd say that's really it for me, to be honest. I mean, you want to see all the young guys improve.
Yeah.
We'll be kidding.
Yeah. But
I want to add to that too, because you talked about getting beat on the glass. And one thing we saw in the preseason was the points in the paint and how every game they were outscored in the paint. And that's the reality of going small ball with Isaiah Stewart. So I'm with you. And I think we'd all agree here that you see Isaiah Stewart as a 4 in the future. Like if he's shown, which he's taken steps, he took 10 3-pointers his last preseason game, hit 4 of them. Like, now, you want to see him take that volume? Probably not. But again, he can do it. Like that's what you want to see from Stewart. And I think eventually that him starting at the 4 spot and having Duren at the 5, not only do you bring size, you bring guys that can switch. At least with Stu, he can switch between 5 positions. And you have Duren who can at least deter shots and block shots.
But also
with his athleticism. So a lot to look forward to in the front court.
But also just talk about the potential energy that presents as well. I mean, Jack, I don't know about you, but one thing that excites me, I think of when we're talking about comparing cores and looking where we're at, where other teams are at. I know a lot of people are really keen and excited on the Cleveland Cavaliers right now. I would argue that in the long term, if this Pistons young core is currently constructed, develops, I would argue this Pistons team can give them a lot of problems, especially if the Duren Isaiah Stewart front court works, just because of not only their physicality that they're going to be able to present. Like you brought up, Duren's going to be able to crash the glass. And, Greg Kelser even said it himself during the preseason. Duren's we talked about his ability to protect the paint. This kid might be a special rebounder.
Yeah.
And that's saying something with Andre Drummond, with us having Andre Drummond, because he was perhaps the best rebounder of the 2010s. Right. And now in the 2020s, we might have the best rebounder again in Jalen Duren. He might be special.
And I don't think I have any worries in the glass this season with those two guys on the floor because of that physicality and because of that energy that Duren and Stewart brings together. So I feel like that was a problem in some games last year. Quite a few was the glass, especially with Stewart. Like Jack said, the kind of the realistic expectation we have with him of kind of being more of a 4 than a 5. But I feel like when Duren's on the floor with him, the preseason proved a lot with Duren of how NBA ready he is. That was my biggest question mark with him coming into the season. But I think he is very much NBA ready. And with his age being so young, that proves that even 2-3 years from now, he's going to be even more of a better fit for this league and this team.
Yeah, and just to add on, lastly with that sort of jumbo front court, I mean, because we've seen a lot of people talk about the switching and all that sort of stuff. And I think if you've just got Stu at the 5, as soon as he's switched out onto the perimeter, there's literally no one near the paint to come across if he gets blown by or there's a quick pass thrown around. If you've got Duren down on the low block, watching his man in the corner, it just gives a bit more stability in the painted area if you're going to switch everything. Right. So, whereas if you've got Bogdanovic or Bay at the 4, that's the key loss with Jeremy, even though I don't have any issues with him gone. He provided some weak side rim protection and some length alongside Stu. So,
yeah, for sure. And he brought discipline on that end too, which I think one thing is going to be difficult for, Detroit on that side of the ball is going to be discipline at the beginning of the year. I think with Jalen Duren, as NBA ready as he looks, we've also seen that guy can rack up fouls very quickly, remarkably quickly. He might even make Kade go, damn, you get a lot of fouls, which that is saying something. So, a lot of people are why shouldn't Jalen Duren start day one? Well, it's do you want him by halftime? Do you want him available in the game? He'd be fouled out in 5 minutes if he played against LeBron James. You know what I mean? That's just the reality of it. But I think, he is going to have those opportunities to grow. And I think the Marvin Bagley, if there's anything, first of all, thank goodness he was okay, because that injury looked ugly. It looked absolutely ugly. But I think the big thing, we're gonna see that Duren and Stewart, that pairing really get tested early in some important minutes at the beginning of the season. I think it's going to be imperative for their pairing that we see some success early on.
And look how improved that bench is too, by simply having now, if you, let's say you want to go with that front court, you have Sadiq at the 3. Now you have Bojan and Marvin Bagley when he comes back off your bench with Killian Hayes. Like now, yeah, Killian is as good as a passer as he is, good as a defender. And you saw the aggressiveness in the preseason, playing with more talent. Arguably, no, actually no argument. The most talent he's had since he's been here. So it's only going to complement everybody else. So it's exciting, man. They're much deeper this year. And I think that's why it's hard for fans to temper their expectations, because you got a lot of young talent. You just got to see them put it together collectively.
Yeah, for sure. Before we get to the stars, Jack, what are your thoughts on Killian Hayes? What are your thoughts on what his season can be? What are your thoughts on where it can go? I know, going into this year, it kind of felt like, this is a big prove it year for Killian. It still feels like that's the case, right? But I feel like Detroit at least giving him that extension, for next season, not leaving that into question, going into training camp. It almost feels like to me, with especially with how much importance that they're putting into his role as far as being a vocal leader on the defensive end. It seems to me like they were confident that this would be a year that Killian would take a step. And at least from what it seemed like in the preseason, it seems like he's definitely going to be better than last year. It's just, my question is, how often are we going to get that aggressive Killian? Because, we still saw in the preseason, it's not necessarily every night.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. I think my whole thing with Killian has been, so since his rookie season, clearly I don't think it's within him now to be that lead ball handler on a team. I could be wrong, but it's definitely not with Detroit with the recent selections of Jayden Ivy. So I've tempered my expectations of what he can be and what's fair to criticize him of and what's just unreasonable. And I think for me, obviously the efficiency has always been the issue with Killian. We've seen the defense, the passing, both those things he does extremely well, especially for a player of his age. So firstly, though, before the efficiency, for me, it's just always been about his mindset. He's such a confidence player. And you've seen in his first 2 seasons, you can almost tell based off his first couple of shots what Killian you're going to get. Is he going to go back into his shell or is he going to let it fly tonight? And that's what I've been harping about in the off season on Twitter and stuff is before anything, I just want to see a shift in mindset. And that doesn't necessarily mean put up 20 shots or whatever, like he did against the Knicks. That was great, but it's just be aggressive, get to the paint, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but in each of his games, he made a concerted effort to get into the teeth of defense and have this nice little lefty hook. And that's the stuff I'm looking for. Because like I said, Killian's not going to lead your offense and average 20 a night, but I just want to see him be aggressive and play with confidence, because once he plays with confidence, that unlocks his passing to an even more degree. He just looks and makes better reads. And the shot, it's been nice to see him have a couple of double-digit scoring games. So for me, it's mindset first. Let's focus on the rest.
And I think his mindset too, having the mindset like you're talking about, Jack, can help benefit his playmaking ability. Because if you're going to the cup and you're being aggressive, not only are you seen as a legitimate threat now, if teams know what Killian are we getting? Is he going to attack the basket or is he going to kick out? Before he's pretty readable, at least among many defenses. You kind of know who Killian is, but if he can unlock that part where he's listen, you don't have to, like you said, you're not going to take 15, 20 shots, but if you can at least be a threat to defenses, it's going to open up so much more, because now teams are going to collapse on Killian knowing, hey, is he going to take a shot? Nope. Boom. Hit in the corner for an open 3. I want him to make defenses guess, because Kade obviously does a great job at that, and they're different players, but I think Killian can get to that point. And with the talent he has around him on the bench, you're going to want that Killian this year. You really are.
Yeah. Going to Jeff's point, I think that confidence will unlock so many levels. And because of the shot too, I think when the shot falls, that will give a level of confidence that he can then be aggressive in some of those areas too. I think the shot is key falling, because in this league, we know that what this league is these days. It's the 3-point shot, especially in the guard position. So for me, I want to see more confidence shooting the ball. But you guys are so right. I don't need to touch on the passing and the playmaking because Jack and Jeff really covered that well. So
Well, and I think, like the thing with Killian and like, we all led with it starts with his mentality. It starts with with his confidence, because when you get to this point, with a lot of players, and Killian's one of these guys, the physical intangibles are not the issue. He's a good athlete. He's a great passer. He has the intangibles to be, if he had the mentality of a Sadiq Bey, dear Lord, you know what I mean? But the thing about it is, it's about putting those mental pieces together, because Killian, he grew so radically into this body that he has. I mean, even Killian in year 3 looks radically different than he did in year 1. And even that's like a radical change from where he was at just a couple years before that. Right. So I think for him, he's figuring out very much who he is, not only in this NBA game, but also who he is as a basketball player and as a person growing. So, and the problem is, in the NBA world, you just don't have much time to figure that out. So I think, with the amount of talent, with the amount of shooting that he has around him now too, because it's not just like Bojan, it's also guys like Alec Burks, and even like a veteran pick, like big to play in the pick and roll with, like Nerlens Noel as well. I think I think this really is like a prime position for Killian to have success. And, I think in particular, if that 3-guard lineup can be something that, that leads to winning for Detroit as well, I feel like that's something that can put them in a really advantageous position. Just to have 3 playmakers like that, Jack. I mean, how would that not be beneficial, right?
No, absolutely. And they're all, I think Ivy's 6'4", 6'5". Like, you can put Kade, he can defend wings if he puts his mind to it and he's got the energy and focus like that. And I enjoyed watching those 3. I haven't looked at numbers or anything in the preseason because I'm not going to waste my time doing that. Yeah. But I really enjoyed seeing those. Like, we know Dwayne Casey loves 3-guard lineups. We've seen it, I feel like, in each iteration of Pistons teams he's coached. So, I'm really keen to see those 3, how they all mix together. And the last thing I wanted to just say about Killian was I've been so encouraged just seeing him come out with the mentality he has, because, this guy got drafted pick number 7. Like, he's coming into the league thinking, all right,
supposed to be the savior.
Exactly, man. I remember watching his first clips the Pistons were putting out of his first training camp, and I was so hyped. And he had a lot of pressure on him, and in his mind, he's now the Detroit with their first picks have taken Kade Cunningham and Jayden Ivy. He clearly knows he's 3rd in the pecking order, just at his position, let alone in the franchise. And to see him come out and just go, F it, I'm going to give this a crack. Because year 3, this is sort of a little bit of a make or break year for Killian. Yep. So, I've just been really impressed with his mindset. And I know there's a lot more to it than just that. But I think, he's dealt injury, COVID, lots of stuff. So, I've been impressed by the young man.
Yeah, for sure. And we tend to try to write the stories of players so early, right? And I think what we've seen in the sports world over and over again is that if you try to write guys off, before they write themselves off, you're bound to make some mistakes at some point. Like, even in the NFL world, we're seeing Geno Smith, a guy that everyone was writing off as a backup for years, be statistically one of the best quarterbacks in the league this year. It's like in the NBA world, that stuff can happen too. So, man, I'm excited for what Killian has coming up this year and everything that's going on for him. But I mean, guys, it's time it's time we dive in and start talking stars here. We gotta start talking about the guys that people really clicked on this video for. Let's start with Kade Cunningham. You talked about, Jack, a little bit, his passiveness in the preseason. Kade even touched on that in an interview as well with Omari. He felt like that was the case too. So it seems like going into opening night, I know for me personally too, going up against Paolo Banchero, a guy that he was a fan of, a guy that, he has a previous relationship with, I feel like he's going to be particularly aggressive that night. But what's the role for Kade this season? I mean, obviously we all know he's the franchise player, but what do you expect? I want to start with Jack, of course, and we'll go to everyone else, but what do you expect, from Kade in particular this season? What would it take for him to, have like a LaMelo Ball year 2 if he were to become an all-star, what would it take for him to get there? And what is it that makes this Ivy and Cunningham pairing just so tantalizing? Because man, like the more I think about it, it's just the more like even though there were, it wasn't perfect throughout this preseason, there were certainly moments where this looked like this could be the next great Detroit backcourt.
For sure. Well, for Kade, first of all, I think he's starting from extremely. He had an awesome end to his rookie season. We saw the playmaking, the passing, the scoring uptick. I think there's no reason why Kade couldn't be an all-star this season. I know that sounds pretty outlandish, but I could easily see him as an injury replacement or something. I'm not concerned with the preseason at all. I think even James Edwards released an article this morning profiling Cunningham's leadership, and he mentioned in there he was aware of the passiveness and he was just looking to get guys set up. And I think, I think Kade, he has to be the guy first and foremost. This team's only going to go as far as him. It's particularly in this season.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing I'm really want to see Kade improve the most upon is he's just got to hit his catch and shoot threes. He leaves so many points on the table, just not being able to convert his threes. I mean, last season he shot 32% on catch and shoots unguarded. So the free throws have been a point of emphasis for Kade in terms of upping that scoring. But I think if he can start to knock down those threes like he did at Oklahoma State, that's something that will really vault his points per game. And I wouldn't mind, I want to say on defense as well, Kade, just he's a really good sort of help disruptive defender, but obviously, I think you touched on it, the foul trouble can be a real issue for Kade. He gets real handsy. Yeah, so I just want to see him, because not only does it take Kade off the floor, but it just really hurts the team, especially in those first quarters where he picks up 2 quick ones. That's in the first half, that's when you're really trying to assert yourself on the game. So I think Kade's primed for a great season. I mean, we've seen all the stuff about the added weight. That'll definitely help. And then in terms of the pairing with Ivy, I think the tantalizing thing about those two is, one, they seemingly just complement each other perfectly. Ivy's that hustle and bustle, like going to get to the cup. He's going to draw fouls. And then Kade's more of that manipulative, herky-jerky sort of, I'm going to like I see you do this, so I'm going to do that. And he really reads the defense well. So I think if Kade especially can pick up on his three-point shot, those two as a pairing offensively complement each other well. But then on the defensive end, if they can put things together and find sort of a way to coexist well, they've got such great size. I mean, we think of some of the pairings in the past decade, like CJ and Dame, Clay Curry, CP3 Harden. None of those pairings had the size like that. They were all great pairings, don't get me wrong, but
right,
like these two defensively could be extremely interchangeable.
Yeah, most certainly. And I mean, not just, the length, the versatility, the switchability, just, I think, and the other thing too, that's been so great to see from Kade and Ivy in particular from the beginning, just all the reporting that we've seen, everything that they've even said themselves, like, it just seems like they're inseparable at practice, like some of the reporting we saw from the Ringer, from James Edwards, like, they eat together, they lift together, they do everything together, right? And when you have that type of bond and that relationship, that's a great thing to start from. And I mean, Troy Jack hit on a lot of great things there. Kade's just a special leader, right? Yeah. And it's reflected and highlighted on everyone. Like even Bojan, when he came to practice, I remember one of the things he was like, "Yep, we know the franchise player." Like it's like, "Yep, Kade's a franchise player. We know who it is." And it's like, we saw it. I remember even talking like on the night of like summer league, just like watching. The thing that stuck out to me, first about Kade that night wasn't anything he was doing on the basketball court. It was the talking he was doing to his teammates. Mm-hmm. It was the leadership that he was sharing from day one. I mean, Troy, we've just touched so much just about how special Kade is. And I think Jack hit on a lot of great things there. I mean, with the foul trouble, I mean, you and I talked so much, like how many nights was it where it was like Kade had 2-3 fouls in the first quarter? I was like, well, see you next half. Yeah, right. Like that's just like, like some of, like, I know a lot of it's like, the turnover issues are something that's definitely got to be addressed too. But how much is it just having the guy on the court, like the best ability, just being available, right?
Right. Yeah, that'll definitely be a big thing this year that I would look for too. But I think too, you touched on a guy like LaMelo, and I think of a guy like Trae Young and Luka Doncic, and I think something that they've done too to their game is take this team or their team as their own. And we've seen glimpse of that with Kade last year. I think as a rookie, it was a little bit hard to like fully do that. But I think this year in year 2, I think he can really wrap around this as this is my team, and I think that will be a very helpful next step for Detroit, especially if Kade has a year where he's averaging, 24 and 6 and 6, right? So, and then that would probably be in all-star contention there. So I feel like making this his own team, and that starts, of course, with leadership, and we know he's a leader. We don't have any doubts about that. But of course, it starts too with his playmaking. The shots got to fall too. I think there were so many shots last year that I know Kade could have made in his sleep, but they just came up too short or they came up too long. That's the NBA. Those things are going to happen. But I just feel like even if he can increase that 3-point percentage like 3 or 4% from last year, that little bit percent can unlock a level of his game as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. And Jeff, I think even just having, a guy like Ivy next to him, another scoring threat, someone that the defense has to account for. I mean, Kade was double teamed at, such a high level last year. I mean, Jack touched on all the, that low shooting rate from uncontested threes. A lot of times your uncontested shots are harder when all of your other shots are like double or triple team borderline, right? Like it can be crazy.
Sean, you just took the words out of my mouth, baby. I was going right there with it. Jayden Ivy, I think it's funny you brought up that point when you were coming to me, because I was just going to say with Jayden Ivy, he's going to get those open catch and shoot opportunities. So it's integral. He is seen as a threat to be able to knock those down. I think another thing that Jayden Ivy is going to help him with is the turnovers. Because if you look last year, Kade was essentially, if you want to throw Jeremy in there as well, and you saw Sadiq bring it up, Killian Hayes, of course, he was really the primarily the ball handler. I don't know why I lost my English there. And then now with Killian Hayes, you have obviously Jayden Ivy. You saw in the preseason Jayden Ivy take the ball up. Like, you're going to see times where Kade plays off ball. And it's going to be so important for him to be a guy who can, not always, because you want the ball in Kade's hands, but can stand in the corner and knock down shots. And I think also Kade adding 15, 20 pounds of muscle, that's going to avoid him well, especially going to the free throw line. And the foul trouble thing, I think that's more of a, I don't want to just write it off, but that's also just being a rookie. Like, he has to learn when and not to do those things. I think that's going to take care of itself. But I think Jack said it perfectly when ultimately the team's success is on Kade. And if he can come out and he has that all-star caliber season, which I don't think is crazy to say, obviously the wins have to be somewhere in there. If you can win 30 plus games and he's averaging, 22, 23, 6 and 6, whatever it is, those are all-star numbers. Like that's a guy who can, like you said, be an injury replacement. So Kade's probably the last one I'm concerned about, but the biggest thing for me early on in the season, what I'm going to be paying attention to, is that backcourt and how Jayden Ivy and Kade are able to play together, because I think they complement each other very well. But there's also things that, again, they're going to have to work through, some growing pains, like any other young backcourt. So a lot of positives, a couple negatives, but that stuff will all be sorted out as the season goes on.
Yeah, most certainly. Jack, what would be the things that you would see from Kade this year that would, obviously I know that there are a lot of fans that were overreacting, skies falling from preseason or whatever, right? Like, there were people that were calling Kade mid after preseason. I'm like, and like you said, he was so good his rookie year. I'm like, if people want to forget the Kade that dropped 27 points and a half against Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving in Brooklyn at the end of the season, like, go ahead. I personally am choosing not to, because that type of stuff isn't just a fluke. You know what I mean? Like, not just any player can do that. Even if that Nets team was in shambles, I don't care. It's Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Not just anyone could do that in this league. But
no, I was just going to say, I think with Kade as well, like, people need to just give it 15 to 20 games, because and Mike Schmidt's former ESPN draft guy, he's now with the Blazers. He said it best, actually, at the start of last season. Kade is a slow burn. So we saw him, even in his first summer league, it took him, he only played 3 or 4 games, but the first game and a half, he had to warm into it. It seems to be the sort of player he is. And then obviously we saw the start of last season, he had a bit of a slow start. Now, I'm not saying to expect that, but I'm just saying he seems to be a player that likes to feel out things and sort of assert himself. And you see that in each quarter of games. We saw
Mm-hmm.
him. I remember writing an article 1 month in on Kade, and one of the things I said is I'd like to see him assert himself more rather than just in the second half. But I think that's just sort of who he is. He feels it out. He's not necessarily going to come out every game and try and put up 20 in the first half. I think he likes getting his teammates involved and to get them going first, because ultimately, and that's a great trait of LeBron James. Like, you get your teammates will power you to like real success. That's what's going to get you playoff victories. That's what's going to keep you in contention, is having a team that's bought in. And I think that's with his leadership style as well. So, we could touch on the efficiency and improving that and lowering the turnovers. But yeah, I'm not too worried about Kade unless we're seeing issues come end of December.
And finally, he has some spacing too, like a lot more spacing. So that's something we got to look for. Last year, Sadiq Bey, I mean, that's what we had, guys. And Jeremy Grant, don't throw him in there. But this year, a lot more guys, especially on the wing, who are going to be threats, going to give him a lot more space to work with. But you're right, Jack. Like that's who he is. And honestly, I like it. I don't want a guy who's going to come out and want to assert himself and be like, all right, guys, you watch me get buckets, and then eventually I'll get you involved. Get your teammates going, because at the end of the game, you might need them. And I think that goes back and it really complements Kade's basketball IQ, because this is a guy that you don't see a lot of, but he came into the league and he's much more advanced mentally than physically. Usually it's the opposite. It's much more advanced physically, and then you have to come along mentally. He's a special player, man. I'm excited.
And so just on that quickly, Jeff, because I love that point. Like, Kade, I think of what I was like when I was 19 years old. I'm 27. So, but I just think like, this guy, how is he 20 years old? Like, man, like, crazy. It's crazy. And I know a lot of players these days are quite mature because they're brought up in the social media era, but he is a bona fide leader. Like, it's written all over him.
It's a different level. I mean, we just haven't seen that type of character, those type of character intangibles from a number one pick since LeBron, it feels like. And I think, like the way I see Kade in that sense, it's like, with Jayden Ivy, I watch him, it's like a demolition derby. Each and every night, he's looking to attack, he's looking to kill literally at every single second. And like you said, Jack, sometimes he's a slow burn. He's gonna observe things. To me, like, I view it like a chess player. He's the type of guy, he goes up to the board, he's observing what his opponent's doing. He's looking at what's taking place on the board, and he's planning his method of attack, and then he's gonna kill, right? And it's like, sometimes it's not going to be the quickest each and every time. And another thing to keep in mind, and this isn't just making excuses, but this is just what it is. These were his first preseason games. I think, to be honest with you, I don't even think he knew the intensity that players came to preseason with, right? So I think a lot of it, was observing and surveying what that's like as well. So I in my opinion, I think you're going to get a pretty aggressive, I think you're going to see a pretty different tone opening night on. But I think, like you said there, Jack, it's like, it's important to give it 15, 20 games, not just because at that point you can at least, see, like an actual like sample size, but also like, what do we see in the world of like, what do they teach us in the world of analytics, like in the game of basketball? Like something's not considered a trend until there's at least 10 games worth of data. That's because otherwise you're getting into fluke territory unless there's like significant statistics that can show that's actually happening, right? Like, you actually need some games under your belt in order to say something. That you can't just say anything off of 4 games. You just can't.
Yeah, my rule of thumb is 20 games, and that goes back to that 2017-2018 season when we started 14-6. We beat the Warriors. We knocked off the Clippers, I think. Yeah. And I'm hyped. I'm ready to go. And then we lost 10 in a row. And then it's just like, don't make any judgments early in the season until you've got, for me, it's 20 games. I can see 10, 15, but give it.
We didn't even make the playoffs that year, Jack. That was a 9th seed year.
Like, I'm aware.
Don't you worry. I've still never seen a Pistons playoff win, so I'm
my gosh, man. Dude, it's crazy.
My first game fully watching, I watch clips a lot, but my first game that I watched fully was our last win against Boston in game 4 of the 2008 conference. So I started on a high and it's been low.
Yeah, Troy started in the I believe in the Kyle Singler, Jonas Jerebko. He was in those days of being a Pistons fan. So it's crazy that you brought up like you became an NBA fan in 2005. So when I became a Pistons fan was in 05. It was actually a preseason game. There's Detroit on the west, I mean on the east side of the state, and then 3 hours west there's a big city in Michigan called Grand Rapids. That's where I'm at, and Pistons had a preseason game in my hometown against the Dallas Mavericks at the time in 2005. So for me, that's when I was able to go see them in my very first season following the team. They went to the finals. So like for me, like, like I grew up back when this team was the shit and like they were actually like winning games. And like for me, I grew up on that going to work team. So like, man, but it's like, yeah, I grew up, I was a big Andre Drummond fan. Or like when Troy was like, yeah, Jonas Jerebko was my favorite Piston as a kid. I was like, you poor soul, you poor bastard.
That is tough, Troy. Jonas Jerebko, come on, man.
Jerebko, man. You saw a little bit of him though with Drummond. They were teammates for a hot sec.
Boy, were they ever. From Half Court is brought to you by Manscaped. When we talk about post players, there is few better players in the restricted area than our friends over at Manscaped. With great products such as the Lawnmower 4.0 with skin-safe technology, the Weed Whacker, their deodorants, lotions, and more, Manscaped is unrivaled when it comes to the men's hygiene game, serving over 8 million balls worldwide. That's a lot of testicles, ladies and gentlemen. So if you're finding yourself in need of Manscaped products, be sure to go to manscaped.com and use code HALFCOURT at checkout because that can get you 20% off plus free shipping. Our friends at Manscaped sent us these products, and I can tell you that they are absolutely for real. I have been absolutely satisfied and in love with their entire product line, from boxers, t-shirts, the Lawnmower 4.0 to the Weed Whacker ear and nose trimmer. You can really not go wrong. Be sure to go to manscaped.com and use code HALFCOURT at checkout for 20% off plus free shipping. Thank you again to our friends at Manscaped for sponsoring this video. Oh my gosh. But, touching on, a little bit more, another guy that we brought up, Sadiq Bey, like how much his role is going to be imperative, and what Detroit does going forward, but also kind of figuring out like where he fits in the pecking order, where he exactly his role is in the lineup going forward. Because I know a lot of people view, Sadiq as kind of like, the Robin to Cade's Batman, kind of that second in command. I think with Sadiq, he certainly has that capability to be one of the main scorers. I think if we're looking at like how the Pistons would be most successful, I think he would be at his most success as like a third or fourth option personally. But what are your guys' thoughts? What are you guys' expectations for Sadiq this year? Like, what do you think? Like, what do you want to see from him? And I think personally, I think one thing that will help him a lot will be the additions of guys like Alec Burks, the additions of guys like Bojan Bogdanovic, but then even having Isaiah Livers consistently in the lineup too. I think one thing that's going to help Sadiq a lot this year, guys, and Jack, I want to start with you, and then we'll go with Troy. I think having more shooters in the lineup from the beginning of the year, him not being the only threat from beyond the arc, I think is going to help him tremendously.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like a broken record. Like, it's spacing and efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this team has not been able to shoot for so long. And some of that, I'm sure, is by design. But yeah, I think no matter what, for Sadiq, I 100% agree with you, Sean. It helps him. But anytime you bring in a 40% shooter, or you have one on your roster like Livers and Bogdanovic, that's just going to help the offense in general. The spacing, It draws the attention of the defense. It opens up lanes that might not necessarily have been there prior. So I think for Sadiq in year 3, I think it's still going to be a feeling out process of, okay, what sort of scorer is Sadiq going to be? Is he going to be that rookie version, or are we going to get more of a mixed in, do a little bit off the bounce? I think for me, and I'm still, like I said, I'm happy to see Sadiq experiment. Like, this team for me is not still just, they're a player or two away. And I really want to see him. The one thing for me that's sort of, I want to see eliminated a little bit from Sadiq's game is not so much the dribbling into the lane and stuff, because I like that, but just do it with like attack the closeout quickly. Like sometimes, I mean, there was a few in the Pelicans game where he just sort of holds it for like 3 to 4 seconds before making a move. And he just, to me, and Sadiq's proven me wrong a lot. So this could be complete crap, but he just doesn't have the burst to get by. And then if he gets by his guy, he sort of just doesn't have the bounce to get and finish over the top of people. So I like seeing Sadiq, as soon as he gets the ball, attack, 2 dribbles, dribble, pull up, or if you can get to the cup, go for it. Like we saw him get some free throws in the preseason, which was nice. So yeah, I think as you touched on, Sean, 3rd or 4th option is probably where we see Sadiq at his optimal. And yeah, I think the core basis of his game will always probably be from his 3-point shooting, though.
Yeah. And I think Jack touched on a good point there, Troy, where it's like, I think a lot of times we look at where guys, can improve, with like with Sadiq and his burst and his ability to get by defenders. A lot of it's like not just like, the quickness, physically, but it's the quickness mentally of making that decision and, making that read as well. And I think a lot of that as well is just, Sadiq's evolution of his, off dribble scoring, right? That was something that we're seeing add to his game more and more. I think I think the one thing though, that just gives me, peace with Sadiq is the fact that, knowing just how much this guy is in the lab and just how much, and I know every NBA player, it's like, man, this guy works a lot. And it's like, you probably should, like, you're a professional, right? Like every pro is going to work out a lot, but like you were going to have the commitment, like a guy like Sadiq, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And a couple of different things. You brought up a good point, Sean, earlier before Jack went with just the fact that this is the first time in his career where he's not pressured to be your primary perimeter threat from the 3-point line, especially. But I think with him, because of his work ethic and because we know that he dropped a 50 piece this past year, I know it was against the Magic. I just feel in his optimal, I don't think a 4th is where I'm at right now. I think a 3rd. I think a 3rd in his optimal as far as what this team has potential to do. Add free agents, add good draft picks, whatever. I have a hard time seeing him go below 3 because of the potential we see. But I'm very curious to see this year how the other guys, like you said, improve his shot and improve his ability as far as his efficiency on the court. Because we know that he can do it all. How efficient though, that'll be up to debate this year.
But if he was a 4th, Troy, hot diggity damn.
Yeah. Yes. I will give you that. I will give you that. I'll definitely give you that. Yes.
Yeah, for sure. And Jeff, I know we touched on a lot of the. Go ahead, Jack. I apologize.
No, I'm good, man. I want to hear Jeff's thoughts.
No, I think you guys nailed it. For me personally, it's 2 things with Sadiq. And I want to bring up defense too, because I do want to challenge him. I think he could be an even better defender. But it's the consistency. I mean, there was nights last year, and more so his rookie year too, where he'd take 9-10 shots, they'd all be from 3. Like I want the Sadiq Bey that's going to mix it up and make plays with the basketball rather than just playing off ball, but playing alongside now Jayden Ivy. Like you kind of saw that in the preseason, how many more open shots he was able to get. And I think with Kade and even getting better, Jayden Ivy, we'll see what he can do. But even beyond just this year, when you get those 2 guys and you have Sadiq Bey, he's going to get open looks. And someone as dangerous as Sadiq, like you said, Troy, guy can get you 50. Now that was with, majority of your lineup out, but still, like that's the potential we see with Sadiq Bey. And I get where you were going, Sean, too, about saying he could be a 3 or a 4, because if you sign a marquee free agent, that bumps him to a 4. Like whether he deserves it or not, that's just the reality, unless he takes a significant step forward. But this is my theory on it. I think Sadiq this year will be that 2 until Jayden Ivy gets going, and gets more comfortable, and you can rely on him, because early on, Sadiq's the seasoned vet. Like this is a guy who, with Killian Hayes and Isaiah Stewart's been here among the longest. So I'm expecting Sadiq early on to kind of, take strides and take on a big responsibility. And maybe later on, as Jayden Ivy improves, maybe that pecking order switches up. But Sadiq Bey, man, he's a legitimate weapon. And I don't want to just limit him to a shooter, because you talk about his work ethic. There's a lot more that Sadiq can add to his game. And I think defensively, that doesn't really get talked about enough, but he can even be, if he can be a 3 and D, but a guy who can also make plays off the dribble, like you said, it makes him so much more dangerous. So a lot of upside with Sadiq.
And I absolutely love that point you brought up about the consistency, Jeff, because I actually made a post over the summer or your guys' summer. And in wins, Sadiq averaged 21 points. In losses, he averaged 14. So there you go. Like that consistency, really honing in on that and trying to bring it each night will do wonders for his game.
The one thing I just want to see eliminated from Sadiq's game forever, I will say, I know that there's going to be rough shooting nights. I get that.
Right.
If I could go without getting on a box sheet and seeing 1 of 9 or 1 of 12, like this guy has supreme confidence, which don't get me wrong, let it fly. You know what I mean? But at the same time, if we're getting to 1 of 6 territory, 1 of 7 territory, one thing I love about Kade's game, if he doesn't have a shot, he adjusts. He affects the game in different ways, right? And even like we had Keith Black Trudeau on the Pistons Over Under show on Woodward Pistons last week, and he made the joke. He said, "Yeah, right now with Sadiq's defense, I call him. He's like Sadiq's a 3 player. He's not a 3 and D player. He's a 3 player." I'm like, come on, I would go. I don't know if I go that far.
Yeah, he's not a liability or anything, but
he's not a liability.
He
can definitely grow on that end though. And I think some of that might also just be just like how Sadiq might not always like blow by players on the offensive end. Sometimes with that athleticism, he doesn't always stay in front of guys, the greatest either. But I mean, that I think part of that will just be growing and learning. And I think the team as a whole just needs to grow and get better on that end of the floor. I think as we saw at the beginning of the preseason, right? Like it's not just Sadiq, it's the entire team.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. But I think, touching into as we're getting into the, towards the end of this pod, I think, this would be a great time to talk about those rookies, those 2 first-round picks that we're going to be looking at going into this year. I think, saving perhaps the most intriguing topic for last, because I think, these guys, it's always the most fun going into the year talking about our new toys, right? Like our new shiny toys as basketball fans. But I think, and we've had the pleasure over the last couple of years of having some pretty talented groups coming into this team as far as, draft classes goes. But when we're talking about the athleticism that these 2 players present the Pistons and the level of athleticism that they bring, I've never seen that in my time as a Pistons fan. It just hasn't been on this team. It just hasn't, right? Like perhaps the best athletic guard we had on this team, over the last 15 years was Allen Iverson, but even then it was like at the end of his prime. He didn't exactly have that burst. He kind of looked like Russell Westbrook last year, and when he was a Piston, right? Like that wasn't exactly his time to shine. But I think with Jayden Ivy, you look at his stats in preseason, they're not going to blow you away. It was like 12.5 points, 35% from the field. His efficiency wasn't the greatest. Turned the ball over a few times. But man, when I watch Jayden Ivy play, there are moments where I just, when he's in the open court with that burst, when he gets to the basket, and finishes through contact, when he can find his teammates open in the corner, there are just moments where, that guy just looks like he's going to be a star. And so I think personally, when I look at this rookie class, this perhaps, I mean, I know the Kade pick is the most important pick of Troy Weaver's time so far. But in my opinion, this could perhaps be the most defining draft of the Troy Weaver era, just with the athleticism that he brought in, and also just, to get Ivy and Duren in that first round. Just this could be special, Jack. This really could.
For sure. And I think when you looked at last year's roster, the one thing missing was athleticism. I mean, we brought in the team. Weaver brought in Marvin Bagley, and we saw how much that helped Kade and just added a new dynamic to the pretty poor offense, but it just made the offense that much more free-flowing. And to go to the draft, not only because I'm sure we all remember how we felt when they were doing the lottery. We were all disappointed to fall to number 5. But to go to the draft, to get Jayden Ivy, and no slight to Keegan Murray, but to get Jayden Ivy, a player who we don't really know what he could be. There's so much untapped there when you have that level of athleticism at the guard position. And just the size, he's so well built for it. I mean, I guess he is a sophomore, but just the size, you really don't know what he could be. And then to not only just get Jayden Ivy, you get the second best or you get the two best athletes in the draft by taking Jalen Duren, and the way Weaver managed to pull off those trades and everything. Well, no one had any idea what was going on, but to walk away with arguably the two best athletes in the draft was it was something this roster desperately needed. And then to see these guys so far and what they've been able to do in the preseason, like, I mean, you touched on it, Sean. Like, I have not seen an athlete like Jayden Ivy in a Pistons color since I've been a fan. Some people have said Derrick Rose, and some said Reggie, but Derrick Rose is well past his prime.
Yeah, post ACL.
Yeah, like he still had some nice stuff, like the step backs, and he had some nice moves. But
and Reggie was like, he was speedy, but he was never like that athlete that was
sneaky,
like blow a gym away.
Man, he'd have some nice dunks, but he has this massive wingspan. So it's not like he's getting his head at the rim, like And Reggie had like knee and ankle issues from memory, but yeah, just to get someone like we've seen Jayden do it already, where he just splits the pick and roll, and it's just like bang, like he just goes straight through the middle, and it's just like, and then he gets there, and the whole defense, all five heads are looking at him, like the way he can collapse a defense. It's special. So there's so much, and his passing as well is an underrated aspect of his game, and yeah, I'm really excited to watch Jayden.
Yeah, and I think Jeff, we touched on this too, just the fact that. I think what's going to really help this kid a ton. Normally, we don't, talk a whole lot about like players' family environments, but the fact that, Dwayne Casey touched on this in a preseason press conference as well. He touched on the fact that, Jayden Ivy, not only is he getting some, getting the coaching that he's getting, at his NBA gym, which if you're looking at just player development alone, I would argue we have some of the best player development coaching in the entire NBA with John Beilein and Dwayne Casey just alone in the player development staff, and not touching on all the other names that are in that building. But then you also throw in the fact that he has his mom at home, and he has, Ja Morant as someone that's a mentor to him. And he has all these WNBA players that are rooting for him and are in his corner, right? Like, I would argue that, like, as far as the support system and the position to succeed, there are a few players in this organization, just not only in this organization, but in this association that are set up like him with that support system.
No, it's an advantage. I mean, it really is. I mean, you're going to get coaching on the court, and you're going to get coaching off the court and away from the facility from your own mother. So, like, the guy's he comes from a basketball family, and Jack mentioned it. We got to give Troy some credit here for identifying the holes on this team, and it was athleticism, but also it was speed. And Jayden Ivy brings the speed, baby. Like, you see him in transition. The guy looks like, really, at least through preseason, he was the fastest player on the court pretty much at all times. Now, he needs to peel some of that back, like Dwayne Casey kind of alluded to in the summer league, like maybe be more disciplined with your speed. But no doubt, Jayden Ivy brings an element to this team that I haven't seen, at least. Like, you guys already hit on it, but you really haven't seen a guy with this type of potential, with this type of athleticism, meaning that. So for me, for Jayden Ivy, I'm excited to see his defense. That's something that doesn't get talked about enough, because you brought up his playmaking ability. But 6'4" with a 6'10" wingspan, we all know Troy Weaver challenged him to be a better defender. But I think defensively, and you saw it in the preseason, him never giving up on any play, really. And I think that's what sets him back, because this is what frustrated me so much is, Jayden Ivy, he looks like another Russell Westbrook, right? That was a big thing. Well, a guy who just plays with uncontrollable, he's undisciplined. And then you watch him, and you're like, wait a second. Like this, yeah, he has the athleticism, he has that speed, but even as a rookie, he's coachable, and I think that's a big thing with Jayden Ivy. And then Jalen Duren, a guy who Troy Weaver was almost to be honest with you, the fact that he came out after the draft and said I probably would have taken him at 5, that really shows the amount of value that Troy got from this draft. And again, we can never give enough praise to Troy Weaver. But he won the draft, you could argue. The 2 most athletic players, like Jack hit on, from the draft, and 2 guys with tremendous upside that no one really seems to talk about. At least, I mean, you see some national writers talking about it, but at least locally, we understand what we have in these 2 players. They're going to be a significant piece of this team moving forward when they're making postseason runs. And I'm excited because I think not only the athleticism, but the speed Jayden Ivy brings and all those tools that aren't unlocked yet that you didn't really get to see at Purdue, because players, it's really, and this is the thing I always say, is a player is asked what he's asked to do. And people don't understand that. Like, people look at Jayden at Purdue and be like, well, he didn't do this or he didn't do that. Well, he wasn't asked to do those things at Purdue. Like, be as good of a defender as he can be. I mean, he was the best player at Purdue. You're not required to play the defense like that. You're expected to go high in the draft. Now he's in the NBA. He's a part of an organization that values defense. He's going to be held accountable. So he's going to be a better defender. And he wasn't asked to, like, he wasn't even the point guard at Purdue. There was a point guard playing alongside him. Now with the Pistons, he's going to have even more ball handling ability. So a lot of things I think people don't see with Jayden Ivy, you're going to see this year and in the future. So a lot of untapped potential with both of those guys. And Jalen Duren being the youngest player in the draft. Like, a lot of upside with those two guys, man. It's incredible that you're able to walk away with both of them.
Yeah, well, not only like it's like that wasn't like what he was asked to do, but also like I think with a guy like, you know, with Jayden Ivy, just like with how much of the offensive burden that he did have at Purdue, and like especially like to put them in the position that they were to, you know, like to be as competitive as they were. It's like, you know, it's like you want him to go and like lock down everyone on the defensive end too. Like, you know, like a lot the other truth is a lot of players in college aren't always focusing on that end as well. But the fact that, you know, Ivy came in and on draft night talked about how Troy Weaver challenged him to be a great defensive player, and that's something that he wants to be, and it's something that he actively takes that approach. I mean, Troy, when I watch on the defensive, I mean, we talked about the potential of Kade Ivy in the offensive end, and obviously that's where it starts. I mean, that potential's special. But I mean, Troy, the other thing as well, if these guys click on the defensive end too, it can be menacing, can it not?
Yeah, no, absolutely it can. And I think of just what Kade showed us as a defender too. I mean, Cade's, I think we don't talk about his defense too enough in the backcourt. So I just feel like but with him and Kade together guarding some of those guards, and I think of, you know, who are some of the guards he's going to be up against. Some games it's going to be Kyrie Irving, right? Some games it's going to be Russell Westbrook, right? But other games we've already seen a John Morant. So there's going to be guys that he's going to be naturally thrown against, and we're going to see the best of him. And I feel like with the coaching staff that Dwayne Casey is going to be implementing, that culture that Jeff brought up, I think, man, I just feel like this team has a lot of potential in that area that we haven't seen in the past 5-10 years in Detroit. So
yeah, for sure.
And can I bring up one more thing too? I think that doesn't get talked about enough. We talked about this, Sean, in a previous video too. When you look around, there's backcourts in the league. Like, this is why Atlanta traded for DeJounte Murray, because there's always one on some teams that you could pick on, right? With the Pistons, you have two guys that probably aren't going to get picked on. Like, 6'6" point guard, and you have 6'4" Jayden Ivy with a 6'10" wingspan. Like, they're going to be a problem. We talk about offensively because, of course, the average fan, anybody loves offense, but defense, especially in a city like Detroit, which values that side of the ball. My God, like there's a ton of potential with these two, and it's going to be problems for opposing backcourts. Their size is going to be too much, man.
Yeah, 100%. And guys, I don't think there's a better way to end this podcast, or better way to, like, you know, like one last topic than Jalen Duren and his potential of where he can be. I mean, personally, when I talk about when I think of like what I'm most excited or most curious to see opening night. I mean, obviously, I'm excited to see Paolo Banchero. I'm excited to see him face off against Kade. I'm excited to see Jayden Ivy in person for the first time, you know, and just see that speed and what that looks like in person. I'm just curious to see what Jalen Duren looks like in real life, what he looks like in a gym, you know, just how he stacks up. I mean, he looks unreal size-wise on television. I can only imagine what it's going to be like in person. But I mean, you know, Jack, the name that kept being brought up with Jalen Duren was Shawn Kemp, or Dwight, or a guy that you brought up earlier, Dwight Howard. You know, I know people have even compared him a little bit to Andre Drummond, and I think with, like, you know, with his rebounding, I certainly think that's fair there. But you know, in respect to Andre, you know, Andre was never this type of athlete, right? Like he just wasn't. Even like when he was younger, he was a good athlete. He wasn't this. And I really do believe like the upside of Jalen Duren is very, very high. Something, quite frankly, I just don't want to put a limit on to.
And I love that you touch on the physical gifts, because Troy Weaver had this great quote in Mirren Fader's. She did a feature piece for The Ringer on the Pistons, and he said, Duren has all the physical gifts, but he never gets credit for how smart of a player he is. And those names you listed, I'll be honest, I don't know much about Shawn Kemp, but Dwight and Andre, we've seen Duren throw some passes here and there. There's more to him than, I think, big men in particular, ones that have these sort of physical gifts get put into this box of, okay, they're just going to dunk and rebound. Whereas I think with Duren, the exciting thing is, yeah, he's going to do both of that at an extremely high level, but he can make some nice backdoor passes. You can throw it to him on the block or on the high post, and he can actually do some stuff with it. You're not going to be limited to just running DHO handoffs with him because you don't trust him to make the right read. And we've seen the jump shot. It's still a work in progress, but it looks decent. So there's a lot more there than just someone who's going to block shots and rebound and just clean up on offense. That's the exciting thing with Duren. And I think that's why you hear people say there's a world where he could be the guy behind Kade.
Yeah.
That's not inconceivable. So I think there's so much there. And as you touched on, I don't he's 18. He hasn't turned 19 until like next year, I believe. I could be wrong there, but
it's gonna be so he turns 19 in December, but guys, he's gonna have an entire month of NBA action before he turns 19. That's insane. That just doesn't happen very often. So and like even just how intelligent he seems to already be on the defensive end, like instinctively, and his ability to like stay in front of guards was something that like this preseason just blew me away. And like when I think about like how he can have an impact right away and how he can like come in and like play good basketball at early, that's the way, right? And I think like obviously Jack, like I didn't grow up watching a whole lot of Sean Kemp myself either, but the thing about Sean Kemp was he was just such an uncontrollable athlete where he can just run up and down the court, get insanely high above the rim. He's just the type of guy that you can't contain no matter how hard you try, right? And I think that's going to be the thing about Duren on both sides of the court is you could do whatever you want. You're not going to contain him, like just from an energy standpoint, from a physicality standpoint, from an intensity standpoint. Like he just, and I think Troy, the thing that, that just strikes me about him, the more and more I just see him play and the more I hear him talk, the more that, he just fits not only this rebuild and, the Troy Weaver culture, he's a Detroit Piston through and through, just at his core.
Right.
Everything about him, he's a Piston.
Right. And I think of too, this is kind of off topic, but not totally to that point of, to fit the culture with a winning team. I think of in 2004 when the Pistons added Rasheed Wallace. Joe Dumars at the time, the GM said, that guy is a Detroit Piston. And I can say the same thing for Jalen Duren, because I think with him, he brings a presence on defense like I haven't seen that Andre Drummond never brought. I mean, we can just admit that right now.
Yeah.
And I feel like that comes, not every draft, not even every draft has a player that can do that as a true, five. So I feel like he has that. And we look at guys like, Ben Wallace too, who just gave you his heart every single game and provided a winning culture. And I think if we're not just having a rebuild, we're having a restoration, right? I feel like with that, you need a guy like Duren. And again, Durens don't come every draft. So they're able to land this guy this year with Ivy in the first round. Nothing really concerns me with him because I know he's going to have some rough games. I know guys like Giannis might bully him around, even Anthony Davis, when we have some of those rosters going up against. But I just feel like he is going to learn a lot this rookie season from Dwayne Casey. He's going to be this rookie year. We're going to see some challenges with him, but I feel like he's going to fit into this rotation very well. Especially we talked about earlier in this podcast, going with a guy like Isaiah Stewart's going to be very helpful, being on the court together at the same time. So sky's the limit with this kid. I'm excited for what this year will bring, but also years to come.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing that, Jeff, you and I talked about, and I think we all can agree just watching him play so far, at least the thing that I've noticed, that kid is never going to touch a G League gym. That conversation can be put to bed. If he is in a G League gym for whatever reason, something went horribly wrong, because from a raw talent perspective, there's no reason that kid would need to touch a G League gym.
And one thing I've loved too is seeing him and Isaiah Stewart shoot after practice. Like he obviously wants to expand his game, because I feel like, especially nowadays, their traditional big man kind of gets forgotten about a little bit. But even with Jalen Duren, there's a lot of upside there. You saw in college, he liked that, little 15-footer. I think he can kind of implement that in his game in the NBA and really be a threat and even eventually space out. But just starting with Jalen Duren, any player that, takes pride in playing defense is always going to be welcome in Detroit. And that's the side of the ball he embraces. And I love it. One thing though with Jalen Duren is, again, we talked about it again with Kade, and players come in much more advanced physically than mentally. I think that's kind of the case with Jalen Duren. He's a smart basketball player, but certainly you saw in the preseason him kind of bite on a lot of those shots around the rim, and he'd bite on a shot, boom, dump off pass for an easy layup. Like those things need to slow down for him. And I think eventually they will, but learning how to read the play like a Rasheed Wallace. Rasheed was very good at that. I mean, his basketball IQ, the guy was calling out everything. He was always talking on the court. So if Jalen Duren, eventually we all expect, like you said, Sean, he's not going to touch a G League. I mean, he's clearly physically ready, but to have a guy like Dwayne, Rashard Lewis, John Beilein, these guys around him, and to have the support, even veterans like Nerlens Noel, like kind of be that bridge guy for Duren. I think for Duren, man, he's set up to have a significant part of this team. And I think eventually, I don't want to say it, I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but I think he'll be starting by the end of the season. Like it's more of a when, not if scenario. It's just how far does he come along with his development? Because I think eventually Dwayne Casey's not going to be able to say no to him. Like you're going to want the guy in your starting lineup, because you saw last year too how many points they gave up in the paint and how they were, like you said with Isaiah Stewart. The size kind of got to him. But this year, with having a guy like Duren, Nerlens Noel, they're going to be just fine. So it's exciting.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, Jack, you brought up earlier just like how much that, how much they're going to need Duren to get ready at some point. Obviously at this, this year, they're going to be patient with him, and he's not going to touch the court and be starting, in my opinion, unless it's truly necessary or unless he's truly ready. However, I think that, it is going to be about, it is going to be about the importance of him being there, because, you touched on, how much Detroit got killed in the glass, with Isaiah Stewart and Bojan this preseason. I think in particular, I think you really saw that on display against the Knicks, like when they were facing that bigger front court in Julius Randle and Mitchell Robinson. I thought that lack of, physicality was on full display there. So, I definitely think, the where this lineup is at its best, as far as potential, definitely includes Jalen Duren in that lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. And as Jeff sort of touched on, he's going to have these he's going to foul. I mean, I've seen him, his hands at times, he's dropped some passes, but it's just because it's all so quick. Like the speed of the game is always, you hear something or like rookies comment on, or just the change in speed from the college level to the pros, or the physicality, like these things, plus they would be, this is exciting. They're living their dream for the first few games. Like you imagine the adrenaline rush, like it would be hard to get comfortable. So yeah, I think, I'm not sure if Duren starts. I would love to see it. But yeah, I think he will. There's no way he'll be in the G League, as our friend Bryce from Motor City Hoops has said a few times.
Yeah, that ain't happening.
Shout out to Bryce. He was talking about Duren in the G League.
And think about
I ain't
this.
seen that.
And think about this too, like playing alongside two guys that he didn't have in Memphis. We could talk about that with Kade and Jayden, but he's probably going to get 8 to 10 points just off easy baskets and lobs. Like the guy is going to be, with his athleticism, you saw the effect Marvin Bagley had last year, being traded, not really having a ton of plays drawn up for him. Imagine Jalen Duren running the floor in transition. Like his athleticism with Jayden Ivy, he's going to have a lot of easy basket opportunities. But like you said, Jack, he just has to capitalize on that. So, and I think eventually he will. But there's a lot he can get, if you think about it. If he gets a couple baskets just off easy, dump offs or lobs, whatever it is, and then he implements more, skill to his game, whether he can hit a 15-footer or space out. Like my God, like the potential with Jalen Duren, that's going to be a storyline to watch over the next couple of years, what he turns into, because there's a reason why Troy was so high on him coming into the draft. And he fell, which I don't know how Troy works his magic, but things just always play out the right way. It really does. Sadiq Bey, really the last pick in the first round. I don't understand. I don't get it.
He's going to make a lot of NBA general managers look dumb over the coming years for that one.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Think about
And
it. Like, people think Isaiah Stewart was taken in front of Sadiq Bey. Like, we still haven't really processed that yet. Like, the guy just continues to impress me. Troy Weaver, he really is. He's a stud.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. You know who else is a stud? This Jack Kelly, man, dude. Seriously, Jack, thanks so much for coming on, dude. This was a blast, and it's definitely not going to be the last time, man, dude. It's just so fun being able to talk hoops with you, the work that you're doing and the growth that you've been able to have over just this summer alone, but also just, this last season. Just been awesome to see, dude. So just, super pumped to see you crush it this year. Where can people find, where can people find your work? Tell people where people can go get the Jack Kelly experience.
No, I really appreciate that, guys. And as I touched on at the start, like, love what you guys are doing. Big fan of you guys and your growth. Really excited to see your coverage of the Pistons this season. So, but as for me, you can find me at Jack_Kelly_313 on Twitter. And yeah, you'll find my work at Detroit Bad Boys of SB Nation. And I've actually just started a Pistons fan cast thing with a few other guys called The Home Court. So that's in my bio. So yeah, check it out, man. And yeah, Troy, congratulations on getting married as well, my friend. I saw that. So,
Appreciate it, Jack.
Yeah, no, thanks so much, guys. And yeah, I'd love to jump on whenever you guys need a guest.
And Jack, I'm gonna be honest with you, man. You're my first friend from Australia, so this is
yeah,
right. This is a big deal for all of us here.
Yeah, this is the first international guest we've had on the pod, man. That's pretty legit, man.
Hell of a guest.
Yeah. No, dude, we're definitely going to have you on again. I mean, there's going to be a whole lot of basketball to talk about, but dude, you're a friend of the show at this point. 100% you're coming back on. So definitely go give Jack a follow for all that great content he's going to be putting out this year, not just on socials, but also the writing that he's doing, the fan cast is going to be a part of. You're not going to want to miss it, but also you're going to want to be subscribed over here from Half Court because we're going to be pumping out a whole lot of content this season. We're not only doubling down, we're quadrupling down on content. So you're going to want to be sure that you're checking out that as well. But also be sure you're following my guys as well at Troy Sergey 44, at Jeff Iafrady. And if you're feeling oh so charitable, you could even follow even myself at Sean Halfcourt right down there. But that is going to do it here for today's episode of From Half Court, the NBA podcast that is going to be your home this season. If you ever so choose to hit that subscribe button down below. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you guys next time from Half Court. Be sure you subscribe.